In that mysterious and deep swamp in Louisiana, the United States, there is an ancient legend circulating. It is said that there exists a prehistoric river monster from 50 million years ago there. It is said to be even more ferocious than crocodiles, with scales as hard as iron plates. It would even drag humans close to the water into the water and treat them as food on its plate. On a sunny morning, the young girl Fanny, wearing a swimsuit, came to the familiar river. As usual, she soaked her feet in the water to cool off. However, the calm was shattered in an instant. A dark shadow suddenly emerged from underwater. Relying on instinct, she quickly pulled her legs ashore. After getting ashore, she was still in a state of shock. Only then did she notice a row of neatly arranged round tooth marks on her lower legs. The doctors at the local hospital carefully examined Fanny's wound and then concluded that the bite mark was so regular that it was very likely dried from the legendary alligator gar. In fact, since the 19th century, there have been terrifying rumors from time to time about alligator gar eating people in this marshy area. Some people even regard it as a more dangerous creature than the great white shark. In order to search for this creature, biologist Rick, with the heart of seeking the truth, decided to go to Louisiana to find out. After Rick arrived at the local area, he knew that he couldn't do it alone. Moreover, this water area was full of all kinds of dangers, and it was extremely difficult to catch the alligator gar. After asking around, we finally found Jack and Taylor, who were the best at fishing in the local area. Jack was very familiar with this water area. Before long, they drove the speedboat to the place where alligator gar roamed. The waters here exude an air of mystery. The water is murky and the surface is terrifyingly calm. At this moment, Jack found a strange lump in the water. Out of curiosity, he reached out to take it and fished out a jelly-like unidentified object from the water. Before he could be curious, he found an even larger lump in the water. But as soon as his finger touched it, the thing instantly broke into sticky small pieces. Taylor explained unhurriedly that this was a bryophyte, which was closely related to jellyfish. While they were talking, they determined the best scattering point. This time, they used a stronger fishing net. Meanwhile, they began to scatter the fish hooks tied to the float buckets and baits. Moreover, the fishing line had to be made of steel wire because alligator gar would bite through ordinary fishing lines and even electrical wires. Scientists once dissected, caught alligator gar and found strange things such as car dashboards, rocks, and ducklings in their bellies. A few hours later, Rick and the others began to reel in the net. During the reel, Rick noticed that a floating bucket was constantly moving. Something must have been hooked. They hurried forward to check, only to catch a big catfish, which was clearly not the target they were looking for. After releasing the catfish, they decided to come and collect the net when it got dark. After being busy for so long, the group of them decided to go to a local bar for entertainment. The people in this bar were passionate about fishing. The customers here even showed them a metal fish hook bent by an alligator gar. It seemed that they had somewhat underestimated the strength of the alligator gar. In the evening, they set off again in the speedboat to the original place. Along the way, the sound of the engine alarmed many Asian carps. These carp jumped up one after another. Seeing this scene, Rick was a little worried. At this speed, if he was hit by the leaping carp, he was very likely to fall into the water and become the crocodile's meal. Soon they reached their destination. Rick noticed a floating bucket floating rapidly. They tried to pull the fish hook up, but the underwater creatures became more active as a result. With such a strong force, it was undoubtedly an alligator gar. To avoid harming the hooked creature, they didn't forcibly pull the fish hook up. Instead, they let this guy exhaust his energy first. After an hour of confrontation, it was time to pull this guy onto the ship. As Rick slowly lifted the fishing line, a long mouth gradually emerged from the water. It was indeed an alligator gar, but before they could get happy, the alligator gar suddenly broke free from the hook and disappeared into the muddy river water. Although there was no harvest this time, it at least proved that there are indeed more alligator gar here. Early the next morning, Rick and the others changed their equipment and set off again to search for alligator gar. Just like yesterday, they tied a larger bait to the fish hook. This time it went very smoothly and they caught an alligator gar in no time. But this alligator gar was not very big. It was far from the huge creature they were looking for, which was 2 meters long and weighed 200 pounds. Due to the special physiological structure of the alligator gar, they can breathe air briefly on land. Therefore, one can also live very well after being out of water for a period of time. The scales on their bodies are as hard as armor and were once used by the primitive residents as arrows and currency. After releasing this fish, Rick decided to catch an even larger alligator gar. However, The next one they caught was a platypus. They were very surprised. The platypus is as ancient a creature as the alligator gar, but it is not as fierce as the alligator gar. It wasn't long before the next day arrived. Rick still hadn't found the alligator gar he had hoped for. Instead, he discovered an alligator turtle in the water. The alligator turtle is a creature with an extremely powerful bite force and is a latent predator. They use their bug-like tongues as bait to deliver a fatal blow to their deceived prey. Due to the scarcity of natural enemies, most snapping turtles can grow to over 200 pounds. After releasing the snapping turtle, Rick decided to continue reeling in the net. At this moment, they noticed a floating bucket swimming rapidly. Rick pulled the bucket hard, this time with even greater force. It was certain that a big fish had taken the bait. Several people still used the previous method. After dealing with this huge creature for over an hour, the giant was finally fished out. "It's indeed an alligator gar," Rick said. "This alligator gar is nearly 2 meters long. It takes 2 adults to pick it up." After careful observation, Rick found that this huge alligator gar was not as terrifying as he had imagined. In fact, they seemed gentle in nature and would not attack humans on their own initiative under normal circumstances. After weighing, this alligator gar weighed 75 kilograms, which is about the same as the weight of an adult. Finally, in any case, the alligator gar is now an endangered species, and those of such a large size are extremely rare. We should protect them. Humans are afraid of the unknown life, but they never thought that the arrival of humans has already brought damage to their living environment.